Hey everyone, George Christie here with Wine Industry Network. Welcome to another episode of our Win Insider series. As many of you probably have already seen, this is a chance for us to spend some time with different folks within the industry, whether they're on the winery or vineyard side, the vendor side, sometimes the consumer side, association side. And today we're going to be more on the brokerage side. So we've got Christian Klier. Christian is the North Coast Grape broker for Turrentine Wine Brokerage. We've worked with Turrentine for a lot of years. I think Turrentine was probably one of our very first members. I remember meeting with Steve Fredericks and Brian Clements back, and I guess it's probably like 2009. So you guys have been great to work with, and it's really good to have you here, Christian. Thanks for spending some time with us.
My pleasure, George. Thanks for having us. We always enjoy our time working with you and presenting at your shows. You do a great job. You're the North Coast representative in this industry in that regard. We like having everybody in the North Coast. Not to talk about your competitors, but Sacramento is a big show. It's a lot of people in the Central Valley, a lot of Southern people. I'm finding, the more time I spend in talking to people here, less and less people are going out there because of your show here in the North Coast. So we're grabbing a lot of attention. You're grabbing a lot of attention, and we just love to be a part of that with you, George. Thank you.
Well, we very much appreciate your support. And listen, I agree with you. I mean, what happens in Sacramento is fantastic. It's more of a kind of a global stage, if you will, right? So it's really kind of definitely an international flair to it. But it's important for the people here to really, have an opportunity to focus on things that are specifically impacting the North Coast. And in fact, I want to thank you in advance for your time, because I think you're going to be on stage on December 5th at the Expo, giving a little bulk wine and grape update to our audience members, which is always a super popular session that we have every year. So thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. I'll be joined by Mark Cuneo from the bulk side of our team. Mark and I did it, the presentation, I think 2 years ago for you up there. We really enjoy the time. We get big crowds there, good crowds there. We get a lot of great questions. We're just bringing the information from the market and relaying that to our clients. We have a lot of clients in your audience, representing the North Coast, and just trying to get the numbers and the facts to them, and what's happening in the market at your event allows us to present that to a lot of them, and then also to people who aren't necessarily have done business with us. So that's a great opportunity for us to drum up more business. And we're just gonna bring our facts and our charts and tell everybody what we're seeing out there and what's going on. So looking forward to it.
Well, Mark's an awesome guy. I've known Mark for a long time as well. And hey, you know what? That session is just so important, right? Because I mean, you can't predict the future, but you guys have been at it for a really long time. So those indicators do tell a story, and at least sort of give you some insights as to what you might expect. And I think that's why that session in particular is always so popular, right? Because let's face it, I mean, times are a little bit scary, a little bit unpredictable, which we'll talk a little bit about. But the one thing you can't do is bury your head in the sand, right? You have to deal with reality. You have to listen, give yourself the opportunity to listen to people that are out there living it day to day. I mean, I'm sure you're talking to growers every single day about what's going on. So good segue. Let's start with a little bit about your role at Turrentine, and tell people a little bit about that and sort of what your focus is and what a typical day might look like.
Sure. Well, I am the representative for Turrentine Brokerage, representing the North Coast region of California, which I would consider the most important, if not the most important section of our industry. And what I do is I put wineries together with growers. So we collect growers' information in all 4 counties, Lake Mendo, Napa and Sonoma, and part of Solano, and we keep that information in our database. And then when wineries let us know what they're looking for, we present these growers' fruit to those wineries the best we can match up the parameters for which they're looking for. And then we negotiate on the contracts and negotiate terms, pricing, and length of contract, and then we get contracts for these growers, and we find them homes for their fruit. And that's what I've been doing. This is I'm on my 4th season with Turrentine now. I started about 3.5 years ago with them. Prior to that, I was in vineyard management. I'd been doing that for 25 years. And I was raised a pear farmer in Lake County. I'm a 4th generation pear farmer from Lake County. So pretty much born on a tractor. I remember driving tractor at 4 years old at 2 o'clock in the morning, setting smudge pots off with my grandfather and my father. So I've been doing this a long time. It's in my blood. And I can tell you right now, I relate to the growers because I am a grower and I've grown grapes for 25 years, and prior to that, pears since I was born. So that helps.
No, that's a great segue. Because literally, that was my next question, was to talk a little bit about your background. So multi-generational farming family, and you farm, was it just pears?
Yeah, so pears and walnuts in Lake County. Yes, sir. And yeah, we did all the work ourselves mostly. I've been driving tractor since, like I said, I was born. I come home from high school and jump on the sprayer and start spraying those pears. Until I was 17, and I came home and half the pears were rolled over. I was in shock. I looked at my grandfather and he said, "Hey, pears don't make any money anymore. You better study something that actually you can grow and make money." So he's the one who sent me on my path into viticulture and into the vineyards, and it's been very good to me since then. So great advice from my grandfather, and I've been ever since.
So you literally like came home and like half the orchard was like pushed over.
You got it. That's it. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
only gone 8 hours, and I come home and half the orchard was rolled over, and I looked in shock. I was pretty much thinking, I was going to do that the rest of my life. So I was definitely caught off guard in that regard from my
Like,
grandpa.
Grandpa, what? Did we get hit with
Yeah,
a tornado? Like what just happened?
you got it. That was it. Yeah, and so Lake County was very pear orientated too. Growing up, we didn't even start school until the last pear was packed in Lake County. We had over 32 packing sheds. I would oversee our family's harvest, and then I'd go straight to work in the packing sheds and pack pears and drive forklift. And I was actually manager of two small packing sheds at the age of 17, one in Upper Lake, and those pears came ripe earlier. So we pack all those pears. And then I went to Big Valley and then packed another small packing shed. So I was in charge of about 8 people at each one of those locations. And I was barely old enough to be driving.
With the packing sheds, is that basically just where you like put the like type put the pears into the trays or with the shipping trays, or what is that? What is a packing shed exactly?
Yeah, so it's a processing plant, right? So the growers would
Okay.
bring their pears in, dump the pears, we get them sorted. They go through the sorting line. So we'd have a few people on sorting line. We'd cull out the small pears or the rat tails, and then grade the pears. And then once graded, then they would get packed in the appropriate boxes for their sizing, and those boxes would be sealed and then stacked and then wrapped on the planks, and then we'd ship them out, load them on the trucks, and get them out of there and get them to the fresh market
Off
same
the
day.
market. Wow, that's wild. What would you do with like the undersized pears? Like, where would they wind up?
Yeah, well, so back in the old days, my grandfather remembers selling them to Gallo. They used to go into Bartles and James wine coolers. There used to be a market for the cold pears in Lake and Mendocino County, and the wineries used to come up and buy them because there weren't enough grapes to
Um,
fill needs. Yeah,
that's super interesting, man. I'm sure not many people know that, man.
great. Not too many people do know that Gallo was a large buyer of pears in Lake and Mendocino County back in the old days. It was before my times. I never saw that. I was probably still driving tractor in the orchard
Right.
before that was happening. But yeah, I didn't know that. But we had some pretty big players in the market. Dole, Del Monte would come up and contract, and we had there was about three very large packing sheds, but then there was a multitude of small self-pack packing sheds where growers used to be able to just pack their own pears and ship them to market themselves and
Okay.
save. Yeah.
You kind of like co-ops, but also the guys doing individually. Now, was your grandfather, did he start the ranch by himself, or did it go even further back than that?
Yeah, my great grandfather actually was one of the founding fathers of Lake County pear farming. He came up here. Our family was originally from Sonoma County. We were actually neighbors with Luther Burbank, and Luther Burbank actually encouraged my great grandfather to come up to Lake County and plant pears. He thought there was a market for that, and we did it. And my great grandfather, was the founding father of one of the largest pear packing sheds, the Scotts Valley Fruit Exchange.
Wow, see, like I think about things like that, and I'm like fascinated, right? Because I mean, you're talking about like Lake County's still pretty rural, so it must have been incredibly rural back then, right? Just way off the beaten track, and such like an entrepreneurial spirit, right? That your great grandfather must have had, that obviously trickled down through the generations, but to go and chase a dream like that, I don't know, I get fascinated by people that have done things like that.
Yeah, there was only dirt roads to get into Lake County back in those days to get all the way up here. But land was cheap, and being neighbors with Luther Burbank and him being so enthralled into the plant science world, off his recommendation, I think it was a pretty good gamble. And my family, like I said, for over 4 generations, made a pretty good living at doing it. So, and in the
Yeah.
early really, really good living at doing it. So yeah, I was sorry to see the downfall of the pears. I obviously my heart's with the pears, but my wife and kids need food on the table, so I had to get grapes. So
Yeah.
since
But
and grapes actually paid for my college education, so I internshiped all 3 years at Fresno State on campus, and then every summer I came home and worked in the North Coast in Mendocino County. Actually, started in Potter Valley, being an irrigator for Welch Vineyard Management back in the mid '90s, late '90s.
yeah, I want to talk about those guys, but real quick before we move on, I want to. So, do you guys did you sell the ranch? Is the ranch still in the family? What's the latest on the ranch?
Yeah, so the ranch was in the family up until just about 3 years ago. The
Okay.
ranch sold. So too many uncles and aunts and too many decision makers. I was pushing on everybody to plant grapes. Our family's biggest ranch was in Scotts Valley, a very very cold valley in Lake County in the winter. Some say the coldest spot in Lake County in the winter months, and the hottest spot in the summer months. Really good ground for pears. Also, I felt good ground for grapes, but I couldn't get everybody on the same page to plant the family property and grapes. So eventually, grandma was still living out there up until about 8 years ago, and living on the ranch. And we tried some pumpkins and done a pumpkin patch and done some things like that to try to generate some money for the family. But ultimately, when grandma passed away, everyone decided to pull out.
Yeah, I mean that's just reality. I mean, it's tough to as you trickle down through the generations, and there's that many more pieces of the pie, and trying to get everybody on the same page. I mean, that's a very very common story, but I'm sure a little bit bittersweet from you. But what great memories, right? And what a great foundation.
What a
So
great lifestyle. Yeah, what a great lifestyle, agrarian lifestyle. I mean, there was always food on the table. Yeah, there was a lot of hard work, but we played a lot too. We had games and played a lot of baseball. We had a baseball field on the orchard, and
okay.
grew all of our own fruits and vegetables. And grandma canned everything, and we had canned corn and canned tomatoes and everything through the winter. There was a lot of abalone to be had in those days, so we'd go abalone diving in the winter months and stock up on abalone to have meat over the winter months. We had our own milking cow. We had livestock on the ranch. So it was really, you don't see that as often anymore nowadays. And I was lucky to be raised in that way. I still look back at it with very, very fond
Yeah.
memories. Yeah.
I love diving. You can't dive anymore, right? You can't take any abs. Where did you have some secret family spots that you guys used to dive or what?
Oh, we did. We did. Grandpa had the secret spots. We had family friends over there that had private coves and owned property that loved to trade diving rights for pears. So we'd bring cases or boxes of pears over and drop them off at the doorstep, and we got to climb down the ladder and get in those secret spots over there on the Mendocino coast for those abalone. And
Yeah.
yeah, there were some good size abs in those secret spots over there.
My wife's family's got a place southern Mendocino County, just north of between Gualala and Point Arena, and we had access to a couple little spots like sounds like that where you could get in the water even when it was upside down, and there are always a
Yep.
ton of abs. And it's, for anybody who's never done it, it's if, if you're not afraid of the water, it's like Easter egg hunting, right? It's like treasure
Oh,
hunting. It's the
it's
greatest.
yeah, so much fun. And you're on a clear day and you can see, and the water's nice and clear, man. And you can see them. Yeah, it's like an Easter egg hunt, and it tastes pretty good too
Yeah,
when you come
one thing
home.
that people don't realize, like they want to go like snorkeling in Hawaii or diving in Hawaii, which is cool and all that, but like to your point, you get a clear day up on the North Coast. There's so much life. It's mind-boggling, right? It's just
It,
incredible.
it looks like Hawaii, just 35 degrees colder in the water there. You got to have a 5 mil wetsuit on to get in, but if you can manage it and you get in there, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. What a beautiful coast.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt about it. Well, hopefully they'll make their way back at some point here, and we'll be able to get back in the water and go after them. So, okay, so you go to Fresno State, right? That's where you went to school,
Yes, sir.
and you did. I know this is off your bio. You studied viticulture and tree fruits, right? So was that like a almost like a double major or just a double like how what was that like?
So at the time that I attended, it was required that it was a dual enrollment. So they didn't just offer a straight degree in viticulture; it was tree fruits and viticulture. So
Okay.
we're required to study, and coming from a pear background, that was pretty easy for me. But I did study some tropical fruits, and then I did also a big write up on apples because we had an apple orchard on the campus there too, and apples being so close to pears, it was obviously I picked the easy thing for me, right? So I knew everything you needed to know about pears, and it transferred over pretty good to apple. So I did a degree day study on codling moss and apple, because codling moss was our biggest pest in pears in Lake County growing up. So and I know that the apple orchards and apple farmers struggle with the same problem with the worms of codling moss. So I did a degree day study on codling moss on apples down at Fresno State, but my main focus was on viticulture. Most of my coursework was focused on viticulture.
So you knew, like, coming out of there, where you were going to head, and then that's when did you go work for Welch Vineyard Management right out of school, or was there
I did.
something?
Yeah, I did. I went full time with Welch. I had done 2 summer internships while I was at Fresno State with Mark Welch out in Potter Valley too. So it was pretty much determined that when I graduated, I'd have a full time job there, which at that time, was still. I remember there was about 17 classmates that graduated with me that year in 2000, and I was one of maybe 5 that had a job lined up directly coming out of Fresno State. Obviously, there were opportunities in Fresno to go to work for some large companies down there that were basically handing a free ticket. If you wanted to come to work for us, we got a job for you. But I really wanted to be back in the North Coast, being from the North Coast where my family was from. I wasn't looking to stay down in Fresno, although I really appreciated it down there. The breadbasket of the world, right? I mean, so much on there agriculturally, and being an ag major, it was very, very it's exciting for me to be down there. But I really wanted to be home where my family was, where my grandparents were, where my parents were, and aunts and uncles and everybody. And I really wanted to be able to make a living in my rural county, Lake County, and stay in the county that I was born in, and contribute back to that county, like my family had done for 4 generations. So obviously, I was very lucky to have the opportunity to go to work for Mark Welch, and he treated me very well. And I started out small, straight out of Fresno State, making $5 an hour as an irrigator with a bachelor's in viticulture, and I did that for 2 years out in Potter Valley, and then I got transferred over back to Lake County. Mark's company, Welch Vineyard Management, was growing. We had about 1,500 acres in Lake County, and they needed somebody from Lake County who knew Lake County to manage those vineyards, and I got called up, and then been doing it ever since then.
Yeah, well, you paid your dues, right? So you had to pay your dues for a couple of years, then you get to go home. I think that's something, it's sad for me that as you were talking about, wanting to be back close to your family. It's like my family's important to me too, and I get sad sometimes. It's not that way for a lot of people. You know what I mean? And I'm always sort of surprised when people are chasing their dream, but it takes them further and further away from their family. To me, it's like the goal is to be able to chase your dream and be close to your family. So I like the way you framed that up. Did you find, growing up, farming pears, obviously a lot of similarities, but some, obviously some big differences too, as you started kind of migrate into the wine grape world. Was that a pretty easy transition for you? Did you enjoy it? Did you find it pretty, like,
It
yeah,
was different, George. It was definitely different. I was I think the negotiating, and it was a lot different on the sales side. I would say on the pears, it was pretty much. Well, I remember early on, Del Monte and Dole and their representatives, they'd come out to the orchards and they'd talk price with my grandfather. They'd sit down at our table for lunch or supper, and we talk, and everybody got to know each other real well. And then price was negotiated at the dinner table, in the kitchen, with grandma and everybody there, and the whole family there, and everybody who worked on the ranch, and including myself. And then I got into the wine industry, and Mark was really good about letting me kind of learn that process while I was with him there, and how to negotiate with the wineries. And then when I got placed as the vineyard manager over in Lake County, I started taking on those roles myself, on negotiating and selling the fruit for my clients. And I learned it was quite a bit different, just with the amount of different wineries that were actually active as buyers in the industry as compared to the pears. With the pears, it was 3 to 4 big companies that bought all the pears, and that was it. And you either with one or the other. Right. And most of the time, if they came to Scotts Valley, if it was Dole that was coming that year, Dole bought everything in Scotts Valley. And then maybe 5 years later, it was Del Monte, and Del Monte came in and bought everything. So all the growers were all selling to the same people. There wasn't competition for price. I remember, being in meetings with a lot of my grandfather's neighbors and our neighbors, and them all saying, well, yeah, it looks like we're all going to get this price this year. And everybody'd say, yeah, well, we can make money at that. And that would be it. And there wasn't as much back and forth in regards to that. But as far as farming goes, it was pretty much the same labor in pears and in grapes. So pears would finish earlier, and then they'd all jump over to grapes to pick the grapes, right? So pears would come off, and you knew when pears were getting ripe, the Sauvignon Blanc was right behind it. So that's where we're at today, George. Pears are getting picked in Lake and Mendocino County, even though there's not too many left. But and Sauvignon Blanc is starting to get ready to get picked probably next week as well. I do know some early picks in Napa already, in Calistoga and Pope Valley on Sauv Blanc, but we're pretty confident that next week Sauvignon Blanc will be flying off the vines next week in Sonoma. Yeah,
close. So you were with Welch for a long time, and then you went over to work with Clay, right? With Shannon.
Yeah. I had a little transition there. I did teach some plant science up at Mendocino Junior College, and I did, go out on my own for about 5 years and have my own vineyard management company. I learned that I was getting all the clients that Mark and Clay didn't want because they didn't pay their bills. So I down payments for my services than I was actually farming anything. And that I just threw the towel in and got to know Clay. Clay at that time, I had known Clay for a long time. He was probably our number one competition while I was at Welch over here in Lake County. So I had gotten to know Clay during those years. Clay had done a great job, and Mark was slowing down, and Clay was building up, and I knew he was going places and doing a lot of stuff. And I went and knocked on his door and introduced myself and said, I'd like to work for you. And he said, well, you're hired. Let's go. And then about 10 years.
He's very decisive like that.
Yep. Yeah, every job I ever got, George, I knocked on the door and offered my services. It was straight face to face. That's how I met Mark. I was going door to door in Mendocino County because at that time there was more grapes planted in Mendocino, still today, but more opportunities in Mendocino County. And I knocked on Mark's door one summer, and I was in my sophomore year at Fresno State, and he said, "Sure, I'll give you a job." And that rolled into about 10 years of working for him. And then the same thing happened with Clay. Knocked on his door, he shook my hand, he said, "I'll hire you," and that turned into another 10 years with Clay.
Yeah, he's super impressive. He's done so much for Lake County. I got to meet Clay. Gosh, it's been a long time ago. I worked for Corbell for a bunch of years, and so Clay's brother-in-law is a guy named Mel Sanchetti, and introduced us. And he's done some remarkable things. And again, not just for himself, but for Lake County, and pretty impressive. Sir. So that must have been a cool run. So for Clay, did you run all of his vineyard? Like, what did you do for Shannon?
I did. I actually, I knew Mel too. I got to know Mel through Clay, and we actually farmed, Mel handed over the Clarksburg Corbell Ranch to Clay, and he's still farming it today. And I took on farming that for Clay during my tenure there. So I got to know Mel and John Vidia very well. Yeah. And so they're still doing that. It's about 600 acres down in Clarksburg. Clay's still doing that for Corbell. And then, so we had some other large clients, about 1,200 acres in Dunnigan Hills in Yolo County, another 700 acres in Colusa County. And then we were also managing Guillaume Nursery's vineyards and their operation, offering them FLC at their nursery in Sutter County. So those were the three valley counties that I worked in. And then we had Napa. I had about 600 acres in Napa that I farmed also for Clay. And then, quite a few acres of Clay's own property plus clients in Lake County. I would call that maybe 2,300 acres there, and a couple 300, 400 acres over in Mendocino County. So 6 counties and 5,000 acres. And we were doing laps, trying to keep up with it all. I think I put 140,000 miles on a brand new Toyota Tundra in 1 year.
I was literally just about to ask, because you just must have been in your truck all the time, on the phone, whenever you actually had reception, right? I mean, it just must have been wild. And it's hard to wrap my head around how to stay on top of all of those things. I mean, it's one thing to farm, a 1,000-acre vineyard, but it's another thing to farm 5,000 acres spread out over 6 different counties, because I imagine every day there's something, right? Every day there's something. And I don't even know how many different grower or wineries you had to deal with. I mean, that must have just been, your brain must have just been full.
I was very full. I was selling to over 72 different wineries, George. I managed all the contracts. I managed all the grape sales for all the clients. I did all the client relations. I wrote all the budgets. I wrote all the farming plans for each ranch. I managed all the labor. I was the HR manager. I worked employee book, and I put every truck on. We harvested 48,500 tons annually. I put every single truckload on the road. I worked with multitudes of trucking companies throughout the entire northern part of the state. I had trucks going to southern Central Valley, all the way, sometimes even to Oregon. So we had grapes going all different directions. My phone didn't stop ringing day or night, 24/7 during harvest. We harvested 5 months out of the year. We'd start in July down for sparkling grapes in Clarksburg, and we wouldn't finish in Lake Mendocino until mid-November. So it was a lot of coordinating, a lot of moving, shaking. I also managed all of the state, local, and federal clients for the company. Then I also held the FLC license in my name as well.
That's why. Well, you must have some pretty good people, but I think people, even people within the industry, I think that aren't on the farming side don't realize is like just because as soon as those grapes come off, it's like the clock starts ticking for next year, right? So then you're getting in there and you're thinking about pruning and then whatever repairs you need to do and which vineyards are coming out or you're budding over. I mean, it's just like times
Yeah,
5,000, dude. I can't even imagine what your life must have been like. It must have been so goddamn busy.
it was very busy, George. I would say, most people take a little break in December. I was busy getting budgets approved in December. So
Yeah.
I my 800 employees and I didn't lose them because you know how tight the labor market is. So I had to have at least, 5 or 6 budgets approved prior to January 1 to have work for my guys to go into and start pruning and keeping those guys busy. So I didn't lose them to other management companies. It was
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
very competitive field out there. So I was proud of the work though we did together at Shannon Ranches. I was proud of the farming. I got to know really great people, had really great clients, managed those client relations, explained budgets, ups and downs, line items when we'd go over, have to explain that stuff, and get the approval prior to spending that money for those guys. But, and farming, George, there's always something, like you mentioned. So
Yeah.
uh, it
Always
was,
something. And then, you got 72 wineries you're dealing with, means 72 different personalities and 72 different ways of communicating. And I mean, that's a juggling act, man. That is a juggling act. That's
it
better
was.
than any circus.
Yeah, it was a circus. We kept 8 Gregoire machine pickers running all the time in the Central Valley and had 6 Pelonk machine harvesters running up here in the North Coast at all times. On top of that, we grew such steep hillside stuff on Clay's estate that all had to be handpicked. And there's stuff, that the machines couldn't pick. So we're handpick crews at the same time. So I was managing all those aspects of it. We had 3 mechanic shops, 3 EPA numbers, managing all of that as well, all the equipment repairs. I think we had 200 tractors, 200 fleet tractors throughout the state. Had to keep the repair and maintenance going on all those, and then all the compliance in California and keeping all that straight too. It was a big job, real
Yeah,
big job.
just keeping everything logged, right? All the preventive maintenance and stuff. I mean, it's just, I could talk to you about this for a long time, and I don't want to bore everyone who's watched this, but that's crazy. That is absolutely nuts. You know what I was thinking about as you were talking
Yeah,
about from, growing up on the farm, going to school, your first job, all the way working through Clay and with Clay. Really the emergence of, more mechanized farming,
right.
data collection, right? So, I mean, you when you first started as a kid, you're out there driving a tractor, but then fast forward to today, how much more mechanized things have become. All right. So you lived through all that. So that must have been like interesting times too.
It was very interesting, George. I would say just alone the communication, because I remember at Welch coordinating and scheduling trucks and scheduling harvest on a hardline phone. We didn't even have cell phones back in those days, right? We had CBs in our trucks to talk to our crews in the field, but you had to get on a regular hardline and call your trucking company to make sure they're going to be there on time and get them scheduled for the next day's pick and where they're going and where they're dropping next bins off, and calling the wineries on hardline. So that was a completely different set of rules back in those days. Now with the information age, anybody can get a hold of anybody 24/7 with a cell phone, a text message, an email, and we didn't have that back in those days. So whole transformation come about. I will say that Welch Vineyard Management was one of the first to have a machine harvester in Mendocino County too. So we had a core van, and we were selling that real hard on our wineries to accept that machine harvested fruit. And once we got it tuned in, we were doing a lot of machine harvesting. We were sharing that machine harvester between Lake and Mendocino County, and we were getting wineries on board. And I would like to say that Mark Welch and our team were some of the first in the North Coast to get wineries to start accepting in the North Coast that kind of fruit. They'd been doing it a while in the Central Valley, and it'd been pretty well received out there. But North Coast was still holding on to hand picked fruit when I was working over here, and it was a hard sell.
Well, it's funny now, like thinking about it, just being, I was always more on the management side of things, but the hard sell was like the quality, right? So it's like the quality is going to be equitable to what, to what the hand harvesting was. And of course, the mechanical harvesters, the big guys are out there, they're throwing all sorts of research and development money to make sure that things are coming in as gentle as you would like and everything else, right? But it just became a necessity, right? Because labor was so difficult. And I've gone through a number of different like tastings. It's been a few years where you kind of like, hey, this is hand harvest, this is mechanically harvest. There's really no difference, man. I mean, those machines are pretty dialed in.
They are. They are. They're good stuff. We call it grape caviar nowadays because you're not getting any stems, no leaves, or anything with the sorter. It looks like a 2-ton bin of caviar. Honestly,
Yeah,
it's a beautiful thing. In fact, I even had some wineries like it so much they're thinking about paying me a bonus for the machine pick sorted fruit. Yeah. So at one time they were so impressed with it that they were talking about paying us bonuses for it.
I've not heard that one yet, so that's pretty good, man. Well, that
Yeah.
you know what? That's evolution, man. Things change, right? And that's just you have to
Good.
adapt. You have to adapt. Let's kind of go back to where we are now. I don't want to take too much more of your time. This has been super interesting for me. Challenging times out there right now. So, are you having a lot of hard conversations right now? Like, what? I mean, the conversations this year in particular, and I've talked to some other folks that sort of live in your world. They're like, this is going to be a tough year, and next year is not looking that much better. It's just challenging. There's still a lot of bulk wine in the market. Um, it's got to be you've got to be having some of those conversations, which I imagine are quite uncomfortable with these growers that become also your friends.
Yeah, no, it's been a tough market, George. That's for sure. We saw this coming. We kind of tried to prepare our growers for this, this challenging year, and for the next year that we believe is also going to be challenging. We do see some light at the end of the tunnel in 26. We do see some rebound coming. We are seeing some upticks with certain brands and varietals that the consumer is taking to, and they're choosing white grapes right now. So Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc have been in style, and wineries have been active on those varietals. Red grapes is a hard sell right now, especially in the extreme north, Lake and Mendocino County. We've been through these hard times in Lake and Mendocino County. I think it's a bit more of a shocker for some of the Napa and Sonoma guys, but Sonoma's been a struggle the last year or two too. So those guys have kind of been prepared for it. I think the true correction is what's happening in Napa right now. We got last year the highest district average price ever paid in Napa Cabernet, and this year it's crickets. And to move this fruit, growers are going to have to accept quite a big price difference from last year to get this fruit to move. We do think it will move. We do see light at the end of the tunnel, but it's going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a challenge for growers to make the adjustment from last year's price to this price. And that's been a lot of conversations and bringing people up to speed on what's going on there. But we've been through these hard times before, George. I've seen a cycle like this before, and I will say that what we are saying nowadays is the cycles in the past used to last 7 to 10 years. George, when you and I were doing this in my early years and we were first getting started in this, I saw a pretty good deep one come in the early 2000s, and we saw it go through 2008, 2009. That was almost 8 years of a down cycle. So we think these cycles are moving faster due to the information age, right? So case good depletions can get relayed to the wineries quicker, or not depleting quicker, and wineries can make adjustments on their winemaking styles and what they're doing there to pull back a little bit, and then they can communicate that to their grower reps and say, hey, don't buy as much of this variety this year now, and they can kind of you can turn the ship a lot faster with the information age now, right? With emails and cell phones and communicating. So we don't see the lasting as the 8 and 10 years that we used to see them. We think this is kind of a 5-year cycle, and we do think, and we are counting 19 and 20 in that 5-year cycle. So if you throw this year, next year, and then into 26, we'll be through that cycle. So about half the time, people are able to make adjustments quicker and reset the system faster to where we get back into a positive flow of things. So I think that's happening. It's happening right now. The correction is in effect. It's going to be hard this year. Next year is going to be hard, but we should start coming back out of it in 26.
Well, I think it's like that saying, like, it's not the strongest that survive, but like the ability to adapt, right, to changing times. And of course, the wine industry is famous for not changing that quickly, right? We're sort of like so steeped in tradition, and we do things because this is the way that we've always done them. But I think that's changed a lot, right? Because you've had to change. And
Right.
so I'm on board with your thinking that these cycles we're gonna go through them a little more quickly because people are smarter. They have more access to data, like you just mentioned, and I think they recognize that if you don't adapt, it's like then die. Not being
Right.
too harsh about it, but I mean that's the reality. And I like the kind of a saying that I know I'm sure you guys have said to me a number of times, like, hey, don't be greedy. First offer is usually the best offer. Like, let's move on. You know what I mean? Like, let's move on and we'll fight. We'll worry about tomorrow, but let's take care of today. Um, for kind of looking ahead, like you started to kind of go down this path, but like as you see things unfolding in the near future, what sort of advice do you have for grape growers out there?
Yeah, I would say be very, very understanding and willing to adapt, as you just said, George. I think that's very good advice, sound advice. I would say if you've had a long-term relationship with a winery, my advice is stay in good standings with them. Even if they can't buy your fruit this year or they can't pay you the same price they've been paying you, consider continuing working with them because it's going to be relationships that get grapes sold in this kind of a market. And if they took care of you in the good times, they're going to do their best to take care of you in the bad times. But when the bad times are over again, they'll probably take care of you again better in the good times. So keeping loyalty goes a long way with wineries. And if you've had a long-term relationship with those wineries, do your best to stick with them if you can figure it out, because in the long term, that's always the best play. I think, George.
Well, I agree with it. I think that and I'd say the same for, if I was talking to someone on the winery side, right? It's the best relationships, the best partnerships are ones where you have to give a little sometimes, and then you get a little bit later on. And unfortunately, of course, there are those scenarios out there that when it's the buyer's market, they take full advantage. When it's the seller's market, they take full advantage. But um, in the long term, those type of relationships they don't pay off the same way that the kind of partnerships that you just alluded to do. Well, like I said, I think that we're going through some tough times, on the wine sales side. We've got the kind of neo-prohibitionist movement going on, right there. A lot of chatter out there about, no glasses of wine is the right time, and they're dry Januaries and dry Octobers and things like that, which kind of scare everybody. We're dealing with, competition from RTDs, spirits are popping. But I see like we're doing some things. We're seeing some initiatives that are happening on the winery side, whether it's this new program called Come Over October, right, which we did a webinar. It's like trying to come up
Yep.
with fun programs that encourage people or remind people, I should say, of like, hey, wine's a social thing. Like this is something to be shared with friends. It's something to have when you're ready to celebrate. It's a glass of wine after a hard day of work with your meal. I mean, it's like, so I think as an industry, we're starting to see different initiatives coming from groups like the Come Over October group, or some of the associations that are hoping to kind of push back a little bit and set things right. And of course, that trickles down not just to our grape growers, but like we also work with a lot of other vendors. So our bottle guys, our barrel guys, our cork guys, et cetera. Like everyone's feeling a little bit, right? So I think everybody just needs to hunker down, stay focused, don't hide, and be prepared to come out the other end stronger.
I agree, George, and I think it will happen. And next week they'll write a new article that says wine's good for you again, and we're predicting that article is coming out here soon.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately we've gotten into a position as an industry is that we've kind of rested on our laurels a little bit too long. We've built this industry on the backs of the baby boomers, and they've been a great generation, and they've taken care of us, and it's because of them we're all where we're at today. But we've got new generations coming up, and we need to spend some marketing money at those generations to get them into the wine industry and into our world. And I think being open to have those discussions and put that money towards those next generations is going to facilitate us into the future. And I think having an agrarian association for them is very important. Understanding that the lay of the land and that This all comes from a plant that is grown in soils, and talking about those soils and those areas to this next generation is going to be enthralling. They're gonna respect that. They're gonna gravitate towards it, and making it approachable for them to come and meet the growers in the vineyards and have that experience. That's where we need to focus as an industry onto this next generation and get them as involved as we had the last generation involved, and then we'll all be okay.
I'm 100% on board with you. Just, do the things that peel back the layers, be more approachable. It's not an intimidating thing. And I think that what we have going for us as an industry, which really does appeal to a young consumer, is it's at the end of the day, it's like, as you start to say, it's like, this is farmers, these are real people. This is as authentic as you can get. This is just not like, when you really kind of get down to the bottom line of it, this is not just a branding exercise. These are real people doing real things, and they've been doing for thousands of years. And I think we just need to continue to work on how to make ourselves more approachable. But I'm with you. It's like, we're going to cycle out. Wine's not going away. It's just, it's just part of the cycle.
Agreed, George. Agreed.
Well, Christian, this has been awesome, man. I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better and learn a little bit more about your background. And so that's the most fun part. I can talk about, what's happening in the wine industry, which we should do, and that's important too. But I really enjoy the part of like getting to know people a little bit better and their background and how they wound up where they were. So you've been great, man. Thank you so much for being with us today.
No, thank you, George, for having us. We thank you for everything you do for this industry. It's a very important event. You're the man, George. Thank you. Keep up the hard work. You're doing a great job. We just appreciate to be a part of it. And anytime you have any questions, anytime you want to do anything like this, please just let me know. Always be available for you. And thank you for having us and hosting us to give our market report here in December at your event. Thank you so much, George.
You're welcome. Well, that's a good reminder. So for folks, Wine Industry Expo is going to be December 5th at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds in Santa Rosa. You can learn a little bit more about that. Go to wineindustryexpo.com for more information. And if you enjoyed today's session, go ahead and like us on our YouTube channel, and appreciate you being with us today. Thanks, everybody.